Greetings, productive programmer. So in our previous lesson, we went ahead and started storing the names of our users who are signed up on our site. We store the name now in the database. So we stored Bob here in the database. And now what we want to do, just like medium.com, users display their names here on the home page. Now, I know our home page doesn't look exactly like medium.com right now, but functionality-wise, it does function very similar to medium.com. I'm going to wait until the end of this course to kind of jazz up the UI a little bit, but we can see that we have the title, the body displaying here, and we're going to add it so that the name will display. And all you have to do later on is, it's very simple to change things around, but the beauty of Phoenix LiveView and the LiveView generators are that it displays this really nice, usable, workable interface for us to start off with. And we can focus on the UI, customizing it later. But for now, functionality-wise, it gives us everything out of the box to just continue to focus on building an application that functions like we intend it to. So I'm just going to continue to focus on the functionality until later in the course where we might jazz up the UI a little bit. So we want to display the name Bob here on the stories so that when not just Bob sees it, but all users who come to the home page will be able to, just like medium.com, see the author who posted the story. So in order to do that, inside of our application where we have our blog web, live, story live, and we have our home page, home.html heeks, we can modify this so that in addition to the title and the body of the story, we can also display the user. Now, the one thing that we need to do is we need to grab the user's name though from them. So this is where the database piece of this gets really interesting in terms of databases and how Ecto functions. So if we were to select everything from the stories, for example, we are storing the user ID here. Well, what we need to do when we display these stories here, I can currently come in here and I could, for example, do story and I could do name. I'll just label it name for now. And I can grab the story user ID. And if we come here and we refresh this page, we can display the IDs, right? But we wanted to display the name, obviously. So if we try to come in here and do something like user.name, this is going to break things. So username, we come in here and everything breaks. So how do we go about moving from just using an ID to actually being able to look at items that are on the user struct? So we want to grab properties like name or maybe even email or other properties here, and we currently can't do that. And the change is actually, it's really simple to do, and it doesn't require much effort on our part. So the trick though is that if you know how to do this or know when to do this, because if you're not sure how to the functionality of Phoenix and Ecto and your database with Elixir works, this is going to be kind of really a stump. So what we can do is we can actually just modify the way that our stories are structured. So if we go into where we have so not the blog web folder, but the blog folder, and we locate our stories story module, in here, we have been currently storing the field of user ID to ID. And I left this untouched on purpose originally because I wanted to show you how we can't currently grab the user's name. And now that we have demonstrated that principle, we can actually go ahead and modify this. So check this out. Instead of using a field, we're going to tell Phoenix LiveView that this, and this is also just kind of applicable in general to Elixir and Ecto, we're going to tell our application that this is not just some random ID. This actually belongs to the user, and then we associate it with the struct that we want it to associate with. So we're going to say it belongs to the blog accounts user. And now the story will have an association with the user. So it'll be able to look up the accounts user here, and we'll be able to access all of this information, and this will create a more formalized relationship. And the stories will be smart enough to know that it will look this up on the user underscore ID column because it knows that the user's primary key is the ID that gets generated by default for Phoenix LiveView. And so that's all taken care of for us. all we have to do is store these user IDs here in this field, and it will just kind of magically know because of the standardization that is built into Phoenix LiveView. So I'll show you that in action. So if I do this, I save it, and I reload our page here, we are still just displaying the IDs. So let's go ahead. We want this to actually display the name. We can come into our home page here and change this. Instead of displaying the user underscore ID, which is the field that is going to make the association to by storing the primary key to the users, we're going to actually display the actual user object. So we can do user.id. Now this will cause an issue potentially initially. Let's see. Yep, so there's an issue here. It says association not loaded. So that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with our application. Well, I guess it technically does, right? But it doesn't mean that we did, basically what I'm trying to say, I guess, for lack of a better wording, is that Phoenix LiveView is going to be as lightweight as possible. So it's not going to just by default load your associated users because there's no reason to pass around the extra story data unless you need it. So we're going to tell our application that we do want the user's information because we're going to display, what we actually want to do is display the user.name. So we're going to change this. So make sure you change yours to be story user name here. And again, it won't load, but I'm going to go ahead and make it so that the user object will be basically preloaded, as they say in Elixir, preloaded into the story. And the way that we do that is we can come to where our stories module is, and where we get the stories. Actually, since we are, if you remember correctly, this home page actually lists out all of the stories. It doesn't limit it or anything, so it lists all of them. So here we're going to tell repo.preload that we want to preload all of the users. So it'll grab the user for every single story. So it'll basically go take this user and it will preload it. And since we have our application written like this, it's going to say, oh, this is what you want. It's tied to this. And it will just magically load it for us. So let's come over here to our application, refresh the page. And here we go. Our application is loaded. This, I guess, is a little bit confusing. There's no names displaying here. And the reason is actually our application, if we go select everything from stories, I don't know if we have any stories yet that actually, we have stories with users 1 and 3. We recently created Bob. Bob's actually user 4. Yeah, so that was probably not the best demonstration on my part, but we can just create a new story now for Bob. So we'll just say, hi, I'm Bob, and we'll save this. So you have to remember that our application did not store users, but now users didn't have names previously. But now that users do have names, we can go ahead and display Bob here. So actually the cleanest thing that we can do in this case, since we have some pre-existing data and everything is kind of a mess, this might be a good time to just briefly talk about how you can clean up your application. So what you can do if you want to clean everything up is you can just do a mix ecto drop, and actually just as long as you're in the folder structure of where your application is, you can actually just drop your entire database. And then after you drop your database like this, now let's make sure we go back and let's close our run in application so that this isn't locked. So I just closed the application so it's not being locked anymore. So let's rerun it now that there's no more sessions tied to the database. So we're going to drop our database. So before we had that application running, but I just closed it. So we also have to stop our connection to Postgres. And let's try to drop that one more time. So this is good to know. So if you get these errors, you'll know that, okay, make sure I close my application and make sure that I close my Postgres connections, and then we'll be able to drop the database. Now what we can do is, there's two ways to do this. You could run mix, and then you could do like ecto, and then you could do create, and then you could also do, after doing this, you could run the migration. You don't have to do any of that though. We can just let Phoenix LiveView just do its magic for us. So we'll just start the server, and it'll give us some buttons to click. So we don't have, you see all these errors? All we have to do is just come back here to our application, and let's just create the database by clicking a button, and then it will prompt us, do you want to run the migrations? Let's run the migrations by clicking a button. And now we can get back to where we were. So Phoenix LiveView makes it really easy. Let's go ahead and register. So let's register Bob again. So bob@test.com, and we'll set up a password. So we're going to create a fresh start. We're going to go to edit my stories as Bob, and I'm just going to say Bob story 1, and I'm just going to do this to make the application have some data. So we'll say Bob story 2 body. And now we're just creating some stories here. So if we come to the home page, there we go. Now Bob's name displays next to his stories. I'll go ahead, I'll log out, and I'll create another user just so we can take a look at this. We can do test. We'll have test user, and we can do test@test.com, and then we can create a new password. And now we'll have our test user create some information. So test 1, I'll just create one story here. Just to show you that on our home page, and I'll say Bob and it'll say test user. So now we have the users and their names displaying here appropriately. Additionally, if we click into read a story, we might want to also display their name here. So what we can do is we can come back to our application, and we will set it up so that just like we preload when we list all of our stories, let's preload when we get a story. And then when we go to inside of blog web where we show the story, let's additionally, we need the HEEX file. Let's display the user's name. And this is going to be title name. And there they are. And it reloads in real time, which is, again, one of the conveniences of Phoenix LiveView. So now we have our users' names here. We go to read a story. We can read their name. And there you go. Awesome. So congratulations. You now have the ability when you're building applications to know how to basically set up inside of your schema. So if we come back here to our stories, you know how to associate something to a user. So belongs to user, and you can do this for any one of your structs. You can make a relationship here, and now you know that you can create the relationship by doing belongs to. So our story belongs to a user, and then when we want to grab information about the user, we can just very easily incorporate that by telling our application, we basically just piped these into a preload, and we said preload the user field. And our application, again, is smart enough to say, okay, you want to preload this user, which you said was tied to blog accounts user. And then we can, inside of our HEEX files, we can just do now story user, and we can grab all the properties. So here's name, and this is on the home page. You know, if I wanted something else about the user, I could grab email if I wanted to and have that display. I'll leave it as name though. But you see, you have all the power at your disposal, and you have a high amount of efficiency now to make relationships between your stories and users. Now, the reason that we did this name example, the reason that I wanted to demonstrate names primarily was because the name relationship here, as well as the way that we bring them in and basically preload them and display them on the HEEX files, the way that we do that here is somewhat similar to how we're going to build comments. So now when we are on the home page and we click into read a story, we want to allow users to comment on those stories. And the comments are kind of very similar to how the names association works that we just set up here in this lesson, but they have a little bit more complexity to them. So this is kind of like the gentle introduction to how to preload data and make it display. And now we're going to actually go one level deeper with comments, and you'll see that there's a couple more layers of complexity there, but they build on top of what you just learned when it comes to associating your stories with users and then grabbing your user's name through that association. So you can see we didn't have to go look up the user. We were able to just do story user, grab the name. So very convenient, very, very easy and convenient for us. All right. So I'll see you over in the next lesson where we are going to continue building on top of this application. We're actually going to start building comments into our application. So congratulations. You've come very far. You have a home page that has authentication. Your users can log in. They can create stories, edit stories, delete their stories, but only their stories. So there's authorization built into this. And then they can go to the home page and read everybody's stories. They know who the story is from, just like on medium.com where it displays the user's name on the home page. It displays the user's name here, and when they click in to read the article, so I'm assuming that on medium.com, we click in here and we can see the user's name is displayed. Again, I know the UI is the default UI provided by Phoenix LiveView, but we're focused primarily on functionality now again. So we want to get the functionality working before we dive into everything else like UI design. And we'll just do some really simple cleanup on the UI towards the later half of this course. All right, so I'll see you over in the next lesson where we continue our journey and we will build comments for our blog.